Hi, everyone. How's it going? Good evening. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Stephanie Aline, Director of Partnerships and Programs here at LISC New York. And I'm really just here to open up the evening, give you an idea of how the evening will flow. And then I'm going to open it up for opening remarks by our Senior Executive Director, Ms. Valerie White. But I just wanted to start by, again, saying thank you for being here, and thank you to our partners in Western New York for also being on Zoom. This is the second in a series of hybrid events that we're doing with our LISC New York office. So we have an office here in New York City, and we have one in Buffalo as well. And the idea is that we want to make sure that as we do these series of events, that we're offering perspectives from both, so we can get an understanding of what the realities are like in terms of affordable housing, economic development, and financial mobility and capacity building across the state. So this evening's presentation is called Corridor Revitalization, Community, Commerce, and Cooperation. And we've invited this panel of experts to talk about how development is going in their area. So without further ado, I want to introduce Ms. Valerie White, who will be followed by a series of opening remarks from Mr. Ray Salaberrios of the Economic State Development. We will also have framing remarks by Jeanette Rausch from Department of State, and also have framing remarks by Dr. Calvin Brown of NYC, New York City Small Business Services. And after that, our panel will commence. We'll have a brief Q&A, and then we'll have some additional refreshments. So without further ado, allow me to present Ms. Valerie White.
Good evening, everyone. How are you this evening? My folks in Buffalo, can you hear us? Yes, I think that says yes, he's muted. But thank you for joining us. Again, I am Valerie White, and welcome to our LISC New York Quarters Revitalization, Community, Commerce, and Cooperation event. So we at LISC New York are part of the National LISC organization. We have 38 markets across the US where we have presence. And as an overall organization, we work to equip underinvested communities with capital strategy and the know-how to become places where low and moderate income Americans can thrive. Now, the LISC New York office, the New York City office, we are the flagship. Sometimes we like to remind the other offices, they don't want to hear it, but you know, we started in the great state of New York, and we are the largest office. In last year in March, I actually was in May, and I know the date because it was only a couple of weeks prior to that tragedy of the mass murders in Buffalo, but we merged as an office to provide the impact of services and to grow across the state of New York. So again, we have a current presence here in New York City and in Buffalo in terms of staff, but we are beginning to expand our partnership to a number of other areas, which includes Mount Vernon, who you will hear from today, and Nassau County, and Rochester, and Syracuse, which we're excited about because of the new big chip plant there that will bring an economic foundation to that area of New York State. Utica, New York, that has a big presence there as well. So these hybrid sessions are really important to focus on the uniqueness and customization of what's happening in the markets where we're located, but also to think about it as a broad strategy in terms of how we are going to bring these services across New York State. So in April of 2020, we were right in the middle of the pandemic. That is actually when I started. But we, as an organization, we have been supporting communities, but wanted to step back for a moment and talk about the intentionality of the work that we do in marginalized communities, or communities that have been marginalized, we would say correctly, because they haven't marginalized themselves, right? They've been marginalized by societal impact and that are underinvested. So all of the work we do is guided by 3 pillars, and this is what stands up our investment strategy and our foundation. And the first is radical healing, and that's the unapologetic acknowledgement that there are societal gaps, system gaps, barriers to a number of opportunities in capital, and we stand that up through our policy development and advocacy messaging, the work that we do through our media channels, with cultural institutions, and of course, our partners across the community development framework to ensure that we are messaging what those barriers are, what those gaps are, and how are we working toward closing those gaps as an investment strategy. The second pillar is inclusive economic transformation, and that is our physical economic capital investment in community development and nonprofits through support of our BDOs, nonprofit partners, in affordable housing, commercial real estate in underinvested communities, and just investment in human talent. Our third pillar is sustainable wealth generation in communities of color. And we see that growth or that access to wealth generation and removing barriers through things like ownership, that's home ownership and entrepreneurship, as well as asset building and career ladders of the future. So we believe at LISC that the time has come to forge a future in New York State that eradicates the racial wealth gap for good and provides affordable housing, economic development, and development for wealth attainment to low and moderate New Yorkers across the state. And also, we look to build pathways of meaningful economic opportunity for all. These goals are particularly important and come to light to us as a result of the impact of the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement, which spurred a lot of discussion and programming, and looking at the economic downturn that has disproportionately impacted the livelihoods and the financial security of New Yorkers of color. Now, as a part of this critical work to close the racial wealth gap, we are very proud to support our local community and economic development organizations that provide support and secure the longevity of small businesses and the small business sector all around the state. By strengthening business quarters, not only affords pathways of employment to residents, but provides resources, social services, beautification, sanitation, and all the cultivation and retention of cultural and community aspects in the neighborhoods that we work in. This work also contributes to closing the racial wealth gap by enabling business owners to create wealth through entrepreneurships for themselves and for their family, and ultimately also for the community. As a partner in this work, LISC New York provides capital and capacity support building to organizations like Bridge Street Development Corporation and the Central Brooklyn Economic Development Corporation, the Mount Vernon Downtown Merchants Association, and Fillmore Forward, to name a few. We have over 70 partners that we work with across the state, but those are the partners that you will be hearing from today. So this evening's panel brings representation from those 4 organizations that I mentioned to highlight their organization's efforts regarding local business owners, their strategies to promote small businesses and to attract new consumers, partnerships with LISC, and the stimulation of economic growth within the commercial quarters where they work. So we're also very excited to have some framing remarks that Stephanie mentioned. We are going to hear from Rafael Ray Salaberias, my good friend and former coworker. He's the Senior Vice President of Small Business Capital Access at Empire State Development. We will be hearing from Jeanette Roush, Revitalization Specialist for New York City and Long Island at the Department of State. And that's very important because that organization also works with the Downtown Revitalization Initiatives, the DRI, which support commercial quarters. And my other good friend, Dr. Calvin Brown, thank you, Calvin, for coming, who is the Deputy Commissioner of New York City's Small Business Services Neighborhood Development Division. So the insight of these 3 speakers, their experiences and their resources move this work forward within the city and around the state. And we want to provide resources for you to leave here with tonight to continue or to begin, if the case may be, this work in your own quarters and your communities, and to have you all as a partner and part of the LISC family going forward if you're not already engaged with us. So I want to thank everybody again for being here, here in Buffalo. Hello. And everybody on the phone. The hybrid, again, we're like really excited to do these hybrid events. And this is the second in the series. So we'll invite you to remain connected with us as we continue this, this format to bring about information to all of our partners across the state of New York. And with that, I would like to first introduce Rafael Ray Salaberry, Senior Vice President of Small Business Capital Access at Empire State, to talk a little bit about the expansion of the New York State Capital Access Program, which seeks to increase small business retention through supportive business lending products. So, Ray?
Good afternoon, everybody. Ray Salaberry, Empire State Development. When I left my office today, my team said, Ray, we've got some talking points for you. They gave me like 9 pages. I'm like, I only got 5 minutes, folks, so it's not, I don't think I need 9 pages. So I'm gonna look at this for a bit, but I do want to say that business corridors are of vital importance to our communities. From a personal point of view, I was born and raised in the South Bronx, right? So for me, when I came home from college, I would always go to the bid, Third Avenue, and get a job there, right? Get a summer job. And I remember that because when I needed help, these business corridors were there to help me. So what I do now is I manage the state's access to capital programs. So every morning I wake up and I say, sooner or later they're gonna realize they gave me $800 million to manage. And all that money is going out to small business owners, right? So we have a multitude of programs that actually are meant to make sure we get rid of the bureaucracies and make sure we get the funds in the hands of small business owners that need them. I am not a big Brooklyn person, right? I'm from the Bronx, but I met a bunch of folks from Brooklyn. I want to follow up with them. I gave everyone my card. I said, follow up with me because we're looking to do 2 things. One, we want to make sure we help business grow. We want to make sure that we help entrepreneurs of color. So I was telling Valerie, like last week, week before last, I was in the White House. I was so excited to go to the White House. Right? So I go there and I'm in a table and talking to all the vice president's staff, treasury secretary. At the outset of the program, they had told me that I can't do race-based initiatives. Right? So we started doing initiatives for SETIs, socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. So then last week when I was in the White House, I said, tell me how you're getting money into the hands of entrepreneurs of color. So I was like, whoa, you told me I can't do things like that. Right? So now I know I can. So what we're doing now in New York State is making sure we work with CDFIs throughout the state. And we're providing CDFIs with capital that they need to make these low-cost loans to business corridor merchants, right? To make sure that they have the money to grow, right? The pandemic was a disaster for all of us, right? And we just finished through a whole 1.5-year program of giving out small business grants to small business owners throughout the state. $960 million of grants went out in 1.5 years. So I was proud of the work that we did. I was glad it's over because it was a lot of work. But for now, what I want to just tell you folks is, look, the idea for New York State's Economic Development Agency is just to do that, to invest in the revitalization of communities throughout the state. And like I said, I was born and raised in South Bronx. And what I learned going out throughout the state is that the small business in Cypress Avenue in the Bronx needs the same things as the business in Orleans County and Finger Lakes. Right? They want access to capital. They want it quickly and they want it as cost effectively as possible, which is what we're striving to do. But we want to make sure that our programs cut the red tape and put the money in the streets of people who need, in the hands of people that need these funds. So I will say, Stephanie, she told me I got 5 minutes. I want to make sure I go over my 5 minutes time. I want to make sure that, in all seriously, that for me, it is an honor and a pleasure to work with small business owners throughout the state, right? And so I will leave you with this. When I started working with Empire State, I went to like 5 or 6 different interviews. And every time I went to an interview, they would say, Ray, you got to travel throughout the state. Okay, fine. And then next interview, you got to travel throughout the state. By the third time, I was like, in my mind, I said, I don't know why they keep telling me I have to go upstate. Like, I've never been there. I've been to Mount Vernon. I've been to White Plains. But it was very interesting to see what the needs of the folks in Buffalo, which I'll be there in a couple of weeks, right? Well, we have an MWB forum in Buffalo, work on the Buffalo Bills Stadium. But one of the programs we have is to help minority contractors who need the capital they need to work on the Buffalo Bills Stadium. Right? So we're providing guarantees to CDFIs to lend that money to the small businesses that want to participate in these multi-billion-dollar projects, right? That too often don't include us. So we want to make sure that inclusion now is part of the Bills project. JFK, the JetBlue, Terminal 1, you name it, they're all there, and we're there telling them we have the money. So now I have met some folks here today. I'm gonna tell you again, help me get this money out. That's what I want. If you talk to me today and I give you my card, I think I don't see him here. He's here. He says, there you go. When I get home, I'm gonna check. When I get home, I'm gonna check my emails and see if I email from you. Because for me, the most important thing is that the money that we have, the money that New York State has, gets in the hands of the people that needs them, so we can eradicate this wealth gap, right? Because the wealth gap is a real thing, right? So that we can train folks on how to use their money to grow their business. And one more thing, I have one more commercial. One of the biggest problems we have in New York State is that we have a lot of our folks are unbanked, right? People don't have bank accounts. So I'm doing this commercial. In another few weeks, we're going to issue an RFA to CDFIs, to folks like Start Small, Think Big, so that they can go help people of color who don't have bank accounts get bank accounts. I'm really excited about that. Because it wasn't until I was in college that I stepped into a bank. My mother always took me to check cashing place, so I thought check cashers were the way to go. So I want to not get rid of check cashers, I want to make them less pocket. So please remember, if you are a CDFI, if you are an economic development corporation, and you help individuals, be in contact so we can help you help them. Valerie, thank you. I really appreciate you. You know I do, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
I have to laugh and take a little pause. So I am from Dutchess County, Fishkill, New York. And I used to proudly walk around. I came to go to college in the Bronx, and then I ended up moving to Brooklyn. But you can tell me I was not from upstate New York. And I used to talk about it all the time until, like Ray, I started working at Empire State Development. I got the same question. You're gonna have to go all over. And I'm like, oh, and my daughter went to Oswego, so I know I've been all over New York State, whatever. And New York State is very diverse, is very big. Dutchess County is not upstate. Oswego's not even upstate, right? When I had to go to Watertown and all those other places with the Cajillion bridges, and Cooperstown was really my lesson, because when I got off the highway, I thought okay, I'll be there. I know I had to ride another hour and a half through the farmland. But what I did discover in that job, as Ray said, the need for capital, the need for removing the systemic barriers is the same all over the place, whether it is an urban center, a suburban center, or a rural center. But if you are a person who has been marginalized, you're not getting the investment and access, the need is the same. So that's why at LISC New York, we really are excited to have this opportunity to talk about it across the state and share the best practices, but utilize that to elevate the impact that we can make by leveraging talent, resources, and our partnerships. So thank you for your comments, Ray. I'd now like to introduce Jeanette Rouse, who's a revitalization specialist at the Department of State. And she will talk a little bit about the overview of the New York State Downtown Revitalization Initiative and the New York Forward programs that provide financial resources to communities and projects across the state. So hi, Jeanette. Good to meet you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm really looking forward to hearing the conversation shortly at the table. Our local commercial corridors are definitely changing due to various economic and transportation forces and trends, and most are definitely in need of our collective attention. So I'm happy to see everybody focus on this. I work with a number of communities throughout New York City, the 5 boroughs, and on Long Island, because we're short on staff, who are recipients of the New York State grants, including our Downtown Revitalization Initiative, which we refer to as DRI. It's a $10 million grant. Our New York Forward program, which provides $4.5 million, and some smaller state planning grants, including Smart Growth and our Brownfield Opportunity Area grants that we refer to as BOA. So remember DRI, New York Forward, Smart Growth, and BOA. So almost all of these programs provide resources for local communities for revitalizing their commercial corridors. And if you're unfamiliar with these, please, and other state resources, talk to me and my colleagues at ESD and SBS after. You can also go to our website. Right now, the consolidated funding application is open with applications due the end of July, and that's at CFA, Consolidated Funding Application, resources.ny.gov. You can also look at the Department of State's website to learn more about the DRI program, past DRI communities, plans, and most likely the DRI program, the next round will be released very shortly. The DOS website is dos.ny.gov, and it's not the most user-friendly, but if you look for the community infrastructure subheading, that's where you'll find all the information on downtown revitalization. So I do want to highlight our big DRI program, as it not only does it focus on downtown revitalization, but it really truly is a ground up process. So while not perfect, it does sort of look to the local community to decide what should be funded. It's now in its 6th year, and as I mentioned, we'll soon release round 7 of the New York State DRI cycle, and its smaller sister program now, the New York Forward program. If you look at the New York Forward program, you might be a little discouraged here in New York City because you're going to see words like rural that don't really relate. But in New York City, it's just focused on smaller bid street corridors. This year we have Far Rockaway was a winner of the New York Forward grant, as well as the Garment District. So it's a little different, as everything is with the state's programs when we get to New York City. Local community organizations often initiate these downtown applications, and then in New York City, they coordinate with their borough president. Elsewhere across the state, they coordinate with their mayor or supervisor, but in New York City, it's your BP. So if you're a small organization focused on revitalizing your commercial corridor, and you think this is something you're interested in, speak to your borough president's office. Because the borough presidents officially submit the applications to the more lingo, the REDCs, the Regional Economic Development Councils. And there's a RADC for each of the 10 regions across the state. New York City is one region, Long Island is one region. And each of those regions will be awarded a DRI grant through that program, as well as usually 2 New York Forward grants. So once a community is selected, the state works with the applicant to create a diverse local planning committee of community residents, businesses, civics. Other than the co-chair, which is in other communities, again, the mayor or the supervisor, but here it'll be your borough president. These local planning committees do not contain any local elected officials or government employees. They're supposed to be the local stakeholders. Often you'll have some local businesses, some pastor or priest who has a big congregation. You might have arts organizations, some property owners, but different services. So we work with the local community, create the local planning committee, LPC, and then we bring in our consultant team that we've retained for that particular community, and they are the community's resource. And we go through this very fast 6-month process where we try to be as open, as transparent as possible. We have local planning committee meetings every month that are open to the public. We have 3 large public stakeholder meetings. We have a lot of stakeholder interviews, surveys, other events. And the goal is to for the LPC to put together a slate of projects that are recommended to the governor for funding using that $10 million. And so this past year, Chinatown had the DRI. And so right now, I think it was in January, the governor announced what projects were funded out of their 6-month planning initiative. And right now, the state, either ESD, us, the Department of State, or Homes and Community Renewal, are working with all of those recipients to implement those individual projects that came out of that. Now, the DRI funds are reimbursable dollars, and they're mostly geared towards capital projects, not expense dollars. So an organization like LISC might be very helpful if you need bridge funding or helping you as an organization sort of front those costs. This year, East Harlem won a DRI grant, and we've just sort of kicked off the planning process on Long Island. We've had Riverhead, Amityville last year, and this year Huntington Station. Again, as I mentioned, DRI 7 is probably soon to be released. And I'd just like to share, I'd love to share a lot more with you, but I'd like to share one takeaway that a lot of my experience has been in city government and in trying to get projects implemented. And so one thing that I've noticed about the DRI program, which I really do think has a lot of good things in it that not enough people know about, is that the funding is crucial. Yes, that we're bringing $10 million of $4.5 million to a community and not just doing the planning without it. But it's really been the government assisting in growing that local social capital and sharing the knowledge and government processes to advance local improvements. We can't just approach a community and build what we think they need. We can't just provide funding and then monitor their progress and threaten clawbacks if they don't get the project done. Rather, we all benefit when we slow down. I think those providing the grants, we stick around, we handhold as necessary, and we work with the local ground up organizations to pull in state and local connections to move projects and initiatives forward to implementation and success. We wish that there were a lot more organizations that were out there and had the capacity to just take the money, run with it, build it. But the reality is our rules and regulations, our bureaucracy that needs to be there because we're working with taxpayer dollars, need a little extra hand holding to help organizations. And so building partnerships, I've spent a lot of last year working with our city partnerships. We don't have enough time to reach out to a lot of you here in the audience to tell you about these grant programs. So I'm really thankful for this. But we're looking for partners to help improve your communities. So thank you.
That was a lot of information in terms of available grants. I'm familiar with DRI, but I did not know about all those supplemental potential capital, right, that can help build a commercial quarter. So as we will, and we will, after our last speaker, talk, have the panel speak about their experiences in commercial quarter, but I'm hopeful that everyone in each one of our regions across the state that are online and here in the audience, that you really heard all of those opportunities, because much like those of us that are in affordable housing, you have to build a capital stack in order to get a deal done. Well, it sounds like there's a similar opportunity to revitalize commercial quarters. So Jeanette, I hope, if you stick around, but, and you'll let us send your email to everybody who attended, as well as Ray, and also our next speaker, Dr. Calvin Brown, who is the Deputy Commissioner of New York City Small Business Neighborhood Services, and will share tools and resources that can be used here in the city to develop business quarters. So thank you, Calvin.
Beautiful, just beautiful. Blue is beautiful. Welcome, everyone. So, like mentioned, my name is Calvin Brown, and I am the Deputy Commissioner at the Small Business Services. At SBS, we try to unlock the economic potential and the economic security for all New Yorkers. And we do that in various ways. One is connecting New Yorkers to jobs, creating strong small businesses, and then building thriving neighborhoods. That last part is where my division focuses on neighborhood development. We focus on neighborhoods. We know that New York City is like the city of neighborhoods. Each neighborhood has their sort of distinct characteristics, their cultural aspects, but we want to focus on those small businesses that are truly the fabric of those communities. They are sort of the spine. Some of these small businesses been around for years, legacy businesses that sort of provided the characteristics for these communities that we work in. So what we do in my division is that we provide resources to community organizations that do that work, whether they be business improvement districts or community-based organizations, and which is sort of atypical from the other divisions at SBS. Where other divisions at SBS work directly with small businesses, we work with those CBOs because we're trying to, one, build their capacity, give them the tools and resources that they need that they can continue to do the work. We talked about sort of the scarcity of funding, and sometimes funding is not always there. So we want to leave something with those organizations so that they have the resources to do the work even after our funding may have ended. One of those tools that we have is what we call the CDNA, which is the Commercial District Needs Assessment. And what that really is sort of a snapshot of what's happening along those commercial corridors that are being served by those CBOs. And what it does is it gives those organizations an opportunity to sort of diagnose what those issues are and then come up with a plan working with us. We don't ascribe any plan. We like to work with the communities to kind of think through what sort of approach should they take to sort of address some of the issues that are highlighted or challenges that are highlighted in the CDNA. And that's how we help to build the capacity of these organizations while also giving them the tools that they can continuously use even after our grant is over to kind of support their commercial corridors. The other thing that we like to do is make sure that they're connected with the other services that SBS does provide. We're continuously trying to revamp our services, like even after the pandemic, really pivoting to think about how can we really serve small businesses? Once again, we know funding is an issue, but what other services that we can provide to small businesses? And what we like to do is make sure that those organizations are aware of the other services that we have at SBS. So while they're out there surveying consumers, connecting with property owners, if those property owners mention something that relates to some of the services that we have at SBS, they can connect them back to SBS and to our other divisions, whether it's, trying to increase the MWBE certifications or having compliance officers come out to the community just to highlight things that small businesses should be aware of so they don't get the fines and that can happen. So we like to connect with our neighborhoods. We like to meet neighborhoods where they are. We have 2 signature grants, one of them being the Avenue NYC. If we would have done this a couple of weeks earlier, it would have been, open. The grant is unfortunately closed because we do it at the start of each fiscal year. But with the Avenue NYC grant and the Neighborhood 360 grant, these are the tools that we provide to community-based organizations to build their capacity. With the grant, you're able to hire someone to kind of help with the surveying that comes as part of the grant, but also to then think through a plan for the next couple of years, which is usually 3 years that we offer the funding, to how to approach those challenges in your neighborhood. So we are always here as a resource for any organization. We like to connect them to our other divisions within SBS. I left some materials out there on our New York City Best program, which is a program that if you have any fines, any permits, any trying to navigate city government, we know that that can be difficult for any small organization. You can call that number and you tell them what your issue is, and they'll try to connect you to those city agencies to kind of work through whatever those challenges are. But I love everything that I've been hearing today, because we know that it's very important for us to kind of support our smaller commercial corridors, making sure that we are meeting organizations where they are. That's what equity is. We know that, every organization may be at a different place in terms of capacity, and that's what we try to do. We try to assess where they are and how we can help them so we can move them forward. So I'm loving the conversation, and please continue to, visit our website and then see some of the resources that we do have, especially the ones that come out of my division, which is neighborhood development. Always at June, probably think about looking at our website, because that's when we have our grants open. We do have one grant that is still open, but it does close next week, and it's our Strategic Impact Grant. And that's to do a CDNA. The CDNA through Avenue NYC has to be done in neighborhoods that are LMI, but with the Strategic Impact Grant, we do realize that there's some neighborhoods that don't fall into the LMI pocket, but still need that intervention. So this allows us the flexibility to work in some of those neighborhoods that are not LMI, but still need that commercial corridor support and intervention. So look on our website and apply if you have an opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Calvin. And we will be sure that everyone who registered has links to the websites that were mentioned today. So we're going to encourage you to use them. So I'm going to ask the panelists to come forward. I'm going to introduce folks as they come forward. And you can hear some practical experiences and lived experiences that some of the commercial corridors have. So I'm going to start with Oma Holloway. Hi, Oma, my friend. Corporation, a nonprofit organization that seeks to provide civic and economic development opportunities in Central Brooklyn. I'm sure you're going to talk about Tompkins Avenue. I was driving down there last night. I got excited when I saw the Carvel. I mean, amongst all the other places that I visit, how can you not go to Carvel, right? Who knows Carvel? My kids never know what I'm talking about. When we're on Long Island, I'm like, we got to go to Carvel. It's a crazy obsession, but that pistachio, always have a headache after. You all, because you know what I'm talking about, right? Thank you. Right, that's it. Okay, William Franklin, Director of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Central Business. Forging partnerships. Let me turn the page. I want to make sure you get everything here, William. So forging the partnerships to develop in Brownsville and Central Brooklyn. And I've had the opportunity twice to visit the location that you're in now, right? With the commercial kitchen, and really excited about the work that's going to be happening on Belmont Avenue. So I hope that your days are going to be on Saturday, so I could go to Tompkins Avenue thing on Sunday. And I tell you, y'all got to get together. Yeah, well, exactly. My other good friend, all my friends are here. Andrea Hay from Mount Vernon, and she plays a pivotal role engaging businesses to the association, addressing their needs and concerns, and establishing the relaunch of South 4th Avenue Corridor in Mount Vernon with partners from the city and academic sectors. That walk that we did was amazing. Some of the businesses there really are moving toward what we see as new businesses that have a long-term sustainability. So very excited to see that and to be able to work with you all, and looking forward to what's going to happen there. And then I'm going to introduce our handsome face there on the screen, Carl Skompinski. Forward, an organization supporting the redevelopment of the Fillmore Quarter business districts. Now, Carl, I have been down the Fillmore Quarter, but I didn't get a chance to meet you. So I will be sure to do that when I come back to Buffalo. But
please do.
Your work there, right, to stand up the businesses is very important to what we're looking to do in Western New York. And I know Tyra and Brittany, our staff up there, we don't see them on the screen, but I know they're somewhere. And we are very grateful for the partnership and support. Now, I want to introduce the moderator. This is Prez Adams, the Senior Community Development Officer. Senior Community Investment Officer for our Community Capital Investments Group. And Prez, have you been here a year? About a year, yeah, about a year. We are so excited to have Prez here because he has tons of experience in small business capital, accelerator development, and has really put us in a position to be and finance some exciting projects that are in the economic development space. So I'm going to hand this to you, Prez, and take it away. And thank you all for attending, and thank you for doing this.
Valerie, hello everyone here in New York City and in Buffalo and online. Welcome. I'm excited to jump right in with this panel. I'm going to start by asking each of you kind of a direct question, give you a chance to talk about your organizations. And so with that, I'm going to start with Oma. Tama Open Streets is a popular event that happens every year along Tompkins Avenue in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. The success of this event has been 12 years in the making. And could you tell us a little bit about how this event got started?
Thank you. Thank you. And I really appreciate this question because Tompkins Avenue does have an part of the Open Streets program that the Department of Transportation came as part of an initiative to help us through the pandemic. There are over 200 open streets in the city, but we can say that I think that Tompkins Avenue is a little unique as part of the program, but it's important to know that it did start 12 years ago. And part of that is that Bridge Street's mission, we are a community development corporation, been in the community for over 25 years in Bedford-Stuyvesant. One of the core objectives of our economic development plan was really to develop the secondary corridors in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And to do that, we really wanted to work closely with the small businesses that were starting to come on the secondary corridors, and Tompkins Avenue became the first real partnership we had and created the Tompkins Avenue Merchants Association. So this was a partnership with Bridge Street Development and some of the emerging businesses that came, and most of them were, not all at the time, were owned by Black women. It even has been coined Black Girls Magic Row. And through that partnership, it started off with maybe 6 businesses and now has evolved to over 40 businesses on a core like 6-block strip. So when COVID, when the pandemic hit, we did have an opportunity through SBS to do a commercial district needs assessment. So actually have a copy here. For Bed-Stuy, it was a very opportune moment because we were able to really do an assessment in real time of what was happening to our businesses in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And Tompkins Avenue became one of our partners to, in addition to looking at 6 other corridors, to really see what was happening in real time. And we were able to give data to show that our businesses were losing like 70% of their revenue. The vacancy rates were the highest in the city at the time. And we were able to galvanize our businesses to look at what opportunities were happening in the city. Now, prior to, in that 12 years, we had participated in weekend walks, which was the opportunity to do a full kind of street fair on these 6 blocks, which would happen a couple of times in the summer. We already had the partnership, we had the foundation, and we're able to really, really jump on the opportunity to do an open streets, and because the partnership was there, and you know, and it just, you know, it was just really the opportunity to look at what was happening, to say this is something that the city was offering. How could we make this benefit our businesses so that it could increase foot traffic even through the pandemic, as well as become change the mindset of what Bedford-Stuyvesant offers and make it a destination site in Brooklyn. So that's kind of the quick history, because I know I don't want to take up all this time, and I love talking about Tompkins Avenue open streets. And I'm sure there's more that, you know, I can say about why there is some uniqueness about our open streets that has proven successful. But I will say, I will end with this. Through the work we have done in partnership with the businesses to make this open street with the objective that this is to benefit our brick and mortar, this is the benefit our businesses, to make this a destination site, to make it something that the community wants, as well as beneficial to our brick and mortar businesses. Many of came out, were able to recoup their revenue. So as I said, some had recouped all of, you know, the 70% loss they actually gained. We were able to establish a number of businesses to now become $1 million businesses. And even in our 3rd year, we still can show that there is at least a 10% to 25% increase in their revenue on Sundays when we have our open streets program. So we still have a model that's proven successful in helping those businesses. And as Valerie said, Carvel has moved to the neighborhood. MedFresh has moved to the, said that now it's becoming the destination that people want to come on this corridor.
Great, thank you. So next we'll go to Andrea. So as Valerie mentioned earlier, in April, the LISC New York team visited the relaunch of the 4th Avenue corridor in Mount Vernon. This is a partnership between the Mount Vernon Downtown Merchants Association, Westchester Community College, the City of Mount Vernon, and LISC New York. How will this relaunch support the growth in the area?
Well, this relaunch was what our community needed, especially after dealing with COVID. The relaunch allowed everyone to come out and become unified and not work in silos that they had developed over time. And it also allowed us to unify the merchants on the corridor. In addition to that, it gave us a sense of hope, and we ended up meeting with stakeholders and coming up with a tagline: renew, reimagine, revitalize, rediscover Mount Vernon. And that allowed everybody to come up with ideas that they can use to develop our community. And I'm hoping to one day be like Oma in her community, where we can have $1 million businesses. But it really energized our community. The Merchants Association ended up doing a spruce up day for Mount Vernon on Earth Day. And it was wonderful to see the community come out and participate in the beautification of our streets, to clean it up, to put up plants, to work with the tree revitalization group to plant new life into the community. In addition to that, We also have murals. We have artscapes that we want to see throughout our community. And we're working with our youth to bring that together. We so far have one mural that went up, and it just lifted the area. One of the other things that we have done was make everybody feel a part of the community. And that little bit of revitalizing and reimagining and beautification has allowed us to have more foot traffic on the avenue. And we are hoping that that translates to increased revenue.
Yeah, do you want to touch a bit on what you think might be needed to sustain the work?
To sustain the work, we will need to do further outreach. We need to connect with merchants, the community. We need to connect with government agencies, agencies like Ray's agency, to bring in some funding to make all of this possible. In addition to that, what we want to do is also educate our community about what possibilities are out there so that they can become more successful in whatever they do. We know it's going to take time, but everybody is reimagining so many new possibilities that was not imagined before.
Good to hear. So next we have Will with Central Brooklyn EDC. The Central Brooklyn EDC collaborates with key stakeholders and workforce development, providing resources and support for budding business collectives like the Belmont Avenue Merchants Association. Can you describe some of the work you're developing through the Belmont Avenue Merchants Association in Brownsville and some of the small business collaborations you work with?
Thank you, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I really am. Three things we've kind of done with the Belmont Avenue Merchants Association. The very first thing is that, you know, we connected with the president of the association, and we're supporting the president in building relationships, the type of relationships that they need in order to be successful as a merchants association, with the merchants that's on the corridor first and foremost, and then second with experts like OMA. Because there's a level that a merchants association can actually go to, but it's the experience that matters, right? But it has to be, you know, predicated on all of the things that make that corridor what it is. And that's the reason why we partner with people like OMA, who's successful at it over a decade. The second thing that we do is that we incubate and we train new entrepreneurs. Our ultimate goal is to get the new entrepreneur into a brick and mortar, because that's physically, literally what makes up the corridor. And all of that should lead or will lead to a revitalization of the corridor. And the purpose in that is to actually answer all of the leakage that's on the corridor that you would see in a CDNA, because community residents leave because what they want don't exist inside of the community. So us training new entrepreneurs toward brick and mortar prevents them from actually leaving, because that service or that product actually exists inside of the community. That should also expand the capacity of the existing merchants that's already there, allowing the Merchants Association to do what merchants associations do. And the best thing about it is that the current businesses that's on there become entrepreneurs for the new businesses that's on there. And then it fosters this sense of community inside of that one pocket that would spill over as an example to everybody else in the community. The last thing that we did that we're doing with the Belmont Avenue Merchants Association is bringing anchor businesses. Anchor businesses, if you don't know what that is, that's like, you know, either well-known or organization or businesses that have that are big, right? So they attract people because you either know about them or they have the capacity to facilitate whatever those needs are. And anchor businesses are important for corridors, because what the individual mom and pops or the small big box businesses can do, they attract other people, and then you get the other merchants get to actually enjoy what that business looks like. So we're in the works of actually bringing two to the corridor.
That's great. So last but not least, we have Carl online, who is with Fillmore Forward. Fillmore Forward is a nonprofit organization supporting revitalization in the Broadway Fillmore District and Martin Luther King Park in Buffalo. Support ranges from technical assistance of businesses to arts and music festivals that are hosted in the area. Can you tell us a little bit more about the mix of businesses in the district and any major projects and the impact of this revitalization effort? Oh. Can't hear you, unfortunately, Carl. We can't hear you, Carl. But...
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So first of all, I want to thank LISC for this opportunity, and also Anita and John Sanders, who at Rise and Grind is hosting this event here in Buffalo. The Fillmore Forward's business district really is actually two business districts. It is the Broadway Fillmore business district, and it's bisected by Martin Luther King Park, and then the MLK business district to the north end. That district runs maybe about 1.5 miles to almost 2 miles. And at one point back, I think in the late 30s, early 40s, the Broadway Fillmore intersection was the busiest intersection in North America. It was second busiest, second only to Times Square in New York. And it was also known as Buffalo's second downtown. Today, unfortunately, there's a lot of empty, vacant land, a lot of closed buildings. Buffalo has one of the oldest housing and business stock in the nation. So a lot of the effort that we're trying to do is trying to revitalize some of these buildings before we lose them. The actual makeup of the corridor is really a lot of small businesses with an occasional corporate stores like Dollar General, Aldi's, some banking. There's a mix of barbershops, furniture stores, clothing, neighborhood convenient foods, takeout. On the cultural side, there's various denominations. There's a temple and Buddhist cultural center. Buffalo Islamic Center opened up on the corridor. We have a couple theaters and social halls and organizations. As far as major projects, there's the really big one that was really going to be transformative for the east side of Buffalo. And I refer to it as the east side because it's in the middle of being a transitional name from east side to East Buffalo. So those are kind of used interchangeably. But there's a program called the East Side Avenues Initiative, and it's state and local partners that have put together about $65 million worth of capital investment to improve old commercial buildings, to kind of stabilize them so they can be reopened. Business development for minorities. To start being able to start businesses. There's efforts with the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor to kind of get that as a destination location. One of the other things that happened in the Broadway Fillmore corridor is that it won one of the New York State DRI grants for about $10 million. And I was on the local planning committee, and we recommended 14 projects. And out of the 14 projects that went forward, 11 were actually selected for funding. So that $10 million is going to bring in about $47 million worth of private investment. So, it's quite a bit. These programs that have been mentioned here really do help catalyze and energize these business districts. One of the other things that are happening within our reach within our corridor is that there's a $1.1 billion project to cap an expressway that actually cut through these neighborhoods and separated them, and that's going to help rejoin those neighborhoods. And what we heard just the other day, I think it was on Tuesday, was that part of that project is that the state is going to revitalize about 10 blocks on both sides of where this expressway, with repaving city streets, sidewalks, trees, lighting where needed. So there's a lot of things that are happening in this community, and Fillmore Forward is trying to help, make that connection from local, the business owners to some of these funding sources.
For that, Carl. I think we're good on time. I mean, we're a little behind, but if I need to move on, let me know, LISC teammates. But with that, I mean, we're just going to open up the floor with a couple questions that anybody can jump in on. The next question we have is, LISC New York, as a community development financial institution, provides capital and capacity support to organizations to support their impact. Describe the support you've received from LISC and the impact it had on your work.
The only reason why I'm so excited to answer this question is because one of the three things that LISC did for Central Brooklyn Economic Development Corporation, like the very first thing that I'm going to talk about, is that LISC made my role official. So they gave, y'all can laugh in enjoyment, celebrate with me. I love it. Me and the executive director of Central Brooklyn Economic Development Corporation, who was LaShawn Allen Muhammad, like we worked together for a long time before there was funding to actually pay me. And part of the first question was like our aspirations for the work that we do. And to answer that question, like we're multi-generational Brownsville natives at Central Brooklyn. So the people who actually run the organization and actually making the connections and having a conversation Can you hear me now? Okay. Did you miss anything? Because I'll repeat it. I don't mind. So as far as our aspirations, it's because we're from the community that we work in. So everything that we experience and everything that we're changing and everything that we bolster is things that we've seen work in our own life and someone else's life, our neighbors' lives. And then, so once we got older, so we collected knowledge, skills, and relationships, and we did what W.E.B. Du Bois said, like we went back home and did our part. And me and LaShawn worked together for a long time, and it was no money to fund the work that I was doing. And then LISC came in and gave LaShawn money to officially bring me on as the Director of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. And because of that work is the reason why everything that I explained what we did with the Belmont Avenue Merchants Association, we was able to do. In addition to that, we was able to actually, design in capacity building, education to entrepreneurship pipeline, which turned into our small business incubator. And inside of that, like we've done a few things, like you get a 9-credit academic certificate with us by learning community entrepreneurship. It all leads to economic entrepreneurship. It got the attention and support of other leaders such as OMA. So it did a lot. So that was the first thing that happened. So that's the reason why I was so excited to answer this question, because of that very first thing. It also allows us to capture all of the types of entrepreneurs that's in the community, right? Because it's like 3 levels. Like you got the nascent, you got the most experienced, and you got the person in the middle that if they just had a little bit more support, whether it be, in dollars or in education, they could actually go to the next level. They could be the, the strong entrepreneur. So it allowed us to do that as well. The second thing that LISC gave us was a capacity building grant with the purpose of making us a financial, I want to say this right, a financial opportunity center. And the purpose in that idea is for us to close the wealth gap, which is, Brownsville is like the 6th poorest community in New York City, or the 7th poorest community in New York City, and the first 6 are all clustered in the South Bronx. But it's the poorest community in Brooklyn. So it's a really, really important thing for us to be able to do that. And the last thing that LISC did for us, not really the last thing, right? The next thing that it did for us, because we come in for some more support. The next thing that LISC did for us was give us a cash-in fellow. And if you don't know what a cash-in fellow is probably the most important thing for contingencies, in a disadvantaged community, because you actually get to train the next generation of leaders. So you expose them to everything that you don't see until you decide to become a community organizer. You get to challenge all of those fears or the things that allow you to, that would force you to walk away from community development, especially if you push them toward being high achievers. But they get all of these things and they could take it and be successful somewhere else. But the community needs them to do it and be successful there. So that's the last thing that, the next thing that LISC gave us was a cash-in fellow.
One of the things that LISC did, and we were so grateful to them for, was to allow us to get someone to come in, street sense, to come in and evaluate what our needs are, what we should focus on to revitalize our community. And it made us then focus on the low-hanging fruits first, which is to beautify, relight, and make our community walkable, enjoyable. And it's been a challenge. It has been a challenge, but we are stepping up to the challenge. And it also provided a connection to the Westchester Community College, who provided the technical support and the marketing piece that we needed to let everybody know that we were there and that what we are doing. So we are able to put up advertisement on the bus shelters. We're able to put up murals. We're able to then get the community to come together to learn what is possible out there. So it's a start. I just started in April. I'm the new kid on the block, but I like big sisters and brothers. Working with LISC to do even more.
I have to go back to the pandemic because LISC gave us the small business relief and recovery grants to provide to the small businesses. For Bridge Street, this was so vitally important because even as a community development corporation, during this really difficult time, our businesses were crying for, we need grants, we need support. They were really struggling. So to receive that grant, it required us to go face to face and help them fill out the application. It was, and I can say I personally, because I lived on Tompkins Avenue at the time, literally took a laptop, even with the pandemic, put the mask on. If the businesses were going to risk being there every day, I was going to go to them. And I thought that that was brilliant, that was required, that we had to fill out that application for them. So which meant you had to talk to the businesses, hear the story, see the impact firsthand. Through that grant, we were able to give $10,000 grants. Then there were other smaller grants that we received that we were able to help provide these this relief to our small businesses in Bedford-Stuyvesant. The commitment of LISC, not only to provide TA to the businesses who received the grant, there was so much, they were able to really profile many of our businesses and what we were doing on Tompkins Avenue and what this community on this commercial corridor was about and the diversity of it and what the stories were. And there was so many opportunities that they were able to get the marketing and the PR and the profile that this is a thriving corridor that people probably didn't know about. You know, we talk about Fulton Street, we talk about, you know, Malcolm X Boulevard or Bedford and some of the and Nostrand Avenue, but this one particular corridor had received, I think, 7 out of the 10 grants. And so there was, when everybody else was struggling, it also helped provide the credibility for our organization to say, we are here to support you. And how do we build this partnership? Because if we're going to survive, we have to really work together to do this. And we have to be invested. And LISC was one of the major investment in us as an organization to provide that support, to be that conduit to our local small businesses in Bedford-Stuyvesant, but particularly for this corridor that we have always been working very closely to. And it just came at a really opportune time when everyone was struggling. How do you get the PPP, and how do you access these loans? Looking to see how, I think that we worked with the Chamber of Commerce that came in and they became another resource. And really, how do you facilitate these networks and people together that support the small businesses? And LISC became that vehicle for us, and to allow us to do the work for our small businesses, but actually putting the money behind it, putting the resources behind it. And really what was most important was, you know, I hate to say it, is the marketing and PR behind that. We did not have the capacity to do. They had the capacity, which really helped elevate, one, the work and the corridor itself. So, you know, I really appreciate that. Those are things that probably, if it were not for the pandemic, did we have the capacity to forethought to think about all that we needed to really help revitalize our corridor. I think with LISC as that strong partner, gave us the support and the extra capacity to make that happen.
Thank you. Very insightful. Carl, do you want to?
Yes, please. Here in Western New York, LISC brought together all the commercial corridor leaders and organizations like Fillmore Forward together to look for ways to better work together, to do lessons learned. Most of the organizations here are, you know, at different levels of maturity, right? You have some that are just starting. You have like Fillmore Forward, an all volunteer effort. Others are have staffing and have good funding. But LISC brought us all together, even during the pandemic, and we would go through and talk about different issues within each of the corridors. And we also had the opportunity to do tours of different corridors. So they brought people in from the city to walk through the corridor, what's going to happen, what's the plan for the next couple of years for this particular corridor. And we had a chance to kind of bond and be able to share, you know, best practices, our successes, and even our failures, because you learn from those failures. The other thing that LISC did for us was create an East Side neighborhood planning GIS map, where they took a lot of data from on the east side of Buffalo and they put it in a GIS map with various layers, which small organizations like Fillmore Forward, we just don't have the capacity to be able to get that data and be able to manage it. So that's extremely helpful, because at the end of the day, you need data to be able to manage what you have. You need to know what you have. You need to know where your gaps are, and you need to be able to come up plans to be able to close those gaps. So that map has been extremely useful. One of the things I'd like to see is get the tree canopy from the forestry department as a layer in the GIS map, so we know which neighborhoods within the corridor could use to be retreed, not only for beautification purposes, but also to cool down neighborhoods. Neighborhoods that, you know, disadvantaged neighborhoods are a lot hotter than more affluent neighborhoods. and that impacts the quality of life of the residents. The other thing that personally, on a Fillmore Forward perspective, LISC gave us a grant from their soil fund to be able to fund Fillmore Forward during the pandemic. Being a small organization, a lot of the funders kind of, things kind of slow down everywhere, right? And that helped us kind of bridge that gap. So we're very grateful for everything that LISC has done for Fillmore Forward, but also the business corridor.
Great. Thank you, Carl. We have 5 minutes, right? Great. So maybe one more question, maybe a little bit of a lightning round. What role do you envision intermediaries like LISC New York and other CDFIs playing in this space going forward?
So that we don't waste none of the time, I'm going to head and add to that. At Central Brooklyn, we believe in cooperative everything. And if organizations like the organizations that's on this panel today coordinated some efforts, and for me particularly two, one would be in economic entrepreneurship, right? It would create the kind of freedom that America did for its people, where you could actually, if whatever your skill set is in one state, you could literally go to another state and employ that same skill set. Like if we were able to move like that between organizations, like we would be able to combat, poverty in a significant way. And we would also be able to avoid economic stagnation. We would be able to foster growth, because if that opportunity doesn't exist in one space with these organizations, then it would exist in the other. It would also allow us the opportunity from time to time to consolidate resources, because you buy more, you pay less, and then the people who actually need it actually win from it. The second thing is that it would also allow us to coordinate on policy, whether it be something new or something that needs to be amended, because all of our entrepreneurs need kind of the same thing, right? Like government contracts and tax incentives for new entrepreneurs. And if we coordinated those efforts and the language was, inclusive of everybody, then nobody would be left out, and it would be easy for, the state to kind of support. So that's what I think that either LISC could support with, or we could, deal with each other, or we could deal with each other and then go to LISC for support. But either way, we would all be working together.
I think and I'm not saying that because I'm sitting up here, is that I think LISC has done a fantastic job as serving as an intermediary, and the work that they continue to do, especially as we come out of the pandemic, or so we say we're coming out of the pandemic. Because I think there was always a concern as a community-based organization, as a economic development and community development corporation, that there was such an influx of resources and funding when to support our small businesses when we were in the midst of what was happening in this pandemic, and then it just seems like everything disappeared, or it was an assumption, okay, we're out of the pandemic, so our businesses, yes, we can say that they need resources, but everything is getting better now, and it hasn't, and I think LISC has done a fantastic job of making sure that the issues stay at the forefront, and really convening different panels, different resources, different opportunities that help support those of us that are on the ground, getting the work, trying to get the work done, and trying to stay focused on how do we continue this, to do this type of economic development. And it also helps that they are not only, is it just an RFP, a grant, or some TA, that they're present and walking our corridors, they're present meeting and talking and giving opportunities to let our businesses shine, which also helps bring attention and also bring additional supports to our local communities. So I really commend LISC for the work that it has done and it continues to do. And I think the role that it plays as an intermediary across the state, I just hope they continue and grow, and definitely hope that our Community Development Corporation continues to be the recipient of some of those resources, because it has made a profound impact on our community.
Mount Vernon is 4 square miles wide, and We are now going through our comprehensive plan where we are encouraging the community and the merchants to all get together and decide what they want for our future. And I see CDFs, CDFIs, and LISC organization being an integral part in helping us achieve our goal. We want to bring more of the suburban feel, but at the same time, we want to diversify our community and our commercial corridor to include restaurants, entertainment. We want to be able to include our young people to be a part of the growth so that they feel like they're included into everything. We have an older community as well, and they need the support to continue to have a fulfilled life. In addition to that, our merchants are really in need of dire help. We need education, we need the support. We are so grateful to Andrea Haynes and the city government, the DPW. I have been able to connect with everyone throughout the city, whether east side, west side, south side, and bring everybody together. And the LISC Foundation has been integral in making it possible for all of us to come together by having Westchester Community College be the intermediary between us. And it's a wonderful thing, and I'm looking forward to future growth and more. Thank you.
For us in Western New York, LISC has been really a power player in helping bring together different organizations like Go Bike Buffalo, Open Buffalo, various university departments to create programs to educate the next wave and broaden the number of people that get involved in certain topics. I was part of a cohort of equitable transit-oriented development, looking for ways to improve transit. Transit costs are a very high part of families' budget. In Buffalo, about 30 plus percent of the people don't have an automobile, so they have to rely on public transit. So there's all these issues that they're trying to get around and get to develop around transit and to make transit stations have better development, more frequency. They're also working on a 2-year. It's an upcoming 2-year cohort regarding clean mobility. They want to start looking at clean mobility options within underserved communities. So these kind of things, like there's no way that an organization like Fillmore Forward, a small volunteer group, could be able to pull these kind of programs together, because the key in all of this is education and getting a large number of people more involved in their community, having more of a voice, understanding the issues. And LISC, by partnering with these different organizations and holding these programs, really helps and elevates the conversation within these communities, because it helps people better understand the gaps that are in their community so they can advocate for a better outcome.
Great. I think that's all we have for tonight. And I want to thank the panel. I personally learned a lot, and I mean, it was very interesting. And thank you to everybody in Buffalo and online and here in New York City. We appreciate everybody coming out, and thanks again.